Hello, chess friends, and welcome to the Chess channel, and welcome to the Opera Euro Rapid Chess Tournament that's going on these days. It's of course the second day, and we're now already in the round 7. So far, I think it has been great, great tournament. We have seen the first game between Vachier-Lagrave and Magnus Carlsen, in which Magnus Carlsen lost. But then after that game, Magnus Carlsen had 4 consecutive wins, took over in the tournament, has now a comfortable half-point lead in front of everyone else. I think Magnus Carlsen will make it to the quarterfinal stage for sure. But also a very interesting guy in this tournament is of course Anish Giri. Anish Giri, well, our winner from the Tata Steel tournament. Of course, he lost the game in the finals against Jordan Van Forest, but still I think this tournament, this Tata Steel tournament, was simply Anish Giri's tournament, and I really loved his game. I really loved his attacking style in the Tata Steel tournament, and nothing has changed dramatically in Anish Giri's play, even in this rapid time format, because Anish is still trying to attack. We have seen many times Anish drawing some winning games. Now, basically, Anish is winning drawish games, which is the new Anish Giri, which we need this kind of an Anish Giri, because I always knew that he's a great player, but sometimes he messed up really good positions, and I was a little bit sad for him because he seems really like a nice guy, and I wanted him to have really better and better success in chess. Now in this tournament, again, Anish is trying to push. He's trying to make something happen out of equalish positions. That's really great for chess lovers. So that's really great also for him, because I think it's much more fun to play when you're on the attacking side. So that's why we love, as I said, the new sort of Anish Giri. So let's check out now the game between Anish Giri and Ding Liren. That's from the round 7. Ding Liren is not so good in this tournament. Ding Liren has his troubles, but maybe Ding Liren is not taking this tournament too seriously. He's maybe preparing for the candidates. He's not maybe revealing his best weapons. He's not revealing his sharpest opening. So maybe he can still make something happen in this tournament. But it's, as I said, it's, I think, maybe not so important for Ding Liren. But still, he has troubles. He is now in the lower side of the board, of the rank board in this tournament. So okay, let's check out now this game between Anish Giri and Ding Liren. We have e4 played by Anish. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez. After a6, we have the so-called Murphy defense, bishop to a4, knight to f6, knight to c3. This is the so-called Tarash variation. The Tarash variation is a little bit different than the normal Ruy Lopez. We have c3, d4 ideas. Normally here, with the move knight to c3, you're of course taking out the natural square c3 d4, but I like this idea because the knight is much more active on c3 than it is on this idea's c3 d4, and then you have to bring your knight here on d2. So here it's simply a different line. We have still a nice control of the d5 square, but the problem is now, when you don't have sometimes the knight on d2, then you're vulnerable to some pinning ideas with bishop to g4, and here bishop to c5 played by Ding Liren, because he sensed, of course, that he could take care of, he could get the control around the square d4, so because Anish didn't battle for that square in an early stage of the game. So castling, we have castling also by Ding. We have bishop to c6. You see now many times when black plays with the bishop out on c5, you see many times the exchange variation on c6. I think this is now the most popular way to play the Ruy Lopez from white perspective. The idea is clear, I think, about this move. What white is trying to do, first of all, is mess up the pawn structure. After d takes c6, we will then have here the c7, c6 double pawn structure. But then afterwards, the strategical goal is to simply get rid of one of these bishops, because after here we have d takes c6, we can notice now that black has a powerful bishop pair. So our main goal now is to get rid of at least one of them. We can trade off maybe the knight for a bishop here, or we could try maybe d3, bishop to e3, and then the game is more simplified. We would then play maybe 2 knights versus knight and bishop middle game. But then afterwards, the strategical goal should be maybe to go into favorable endgame, where of course white could have maybe a much better pawn structure, because our pawn structure from white's perspective isn't messed up. So here d3, we have rook to e8, and now comes this idea bishop to e3. If you take now f takes bishop takes e3, we have f takes e3. The problem is now that the f5 square is weak, we could maybe try maneuvers like knight to e2, knight to g3, and then knight to f5. The problem is now, in order to prevent this idea, you would be forced to play the move g6. But if you play g6, you see then the knight could be vulnerable here to some attacks on the f file, because the f file is opened. I think white would proceed here with some f file batteries, with maybe rook batteries or rook queen batteries on the f file. So this is not a good continuation, I think, here for black. Although from an engine point of view, it's maybe equal, but I think from in this human level, from a strategical point of view, white has a much comfortable game here. Bishop to d6, that's why Ding retreats. We have h3 preventing bishop to g4, because when you give up a bishop, for instance, like Anish Giri did here, when you give up the bishop for a knight, then it's very good sometimes to build blockade, sort of fortress on light squares with our pawns. So you see many pawns are now on light squares here by Anish Giri, battling simply against this light square bishop, which we have given up, of course, here by the move bishop takes c6 against the knight. So knight to d7, we have knight to d2. Many times in the Ruy Lopez, you see, of course, the maneuvers with knights. We're searching for better squares. We have knight to f8, knight to e2, knight to g6, and now knight to g3, attacking the f5 square. We have bishop to e6, and now knight to f5. Here, if you try bishop to f5, then e takes f5 comes with the tempo. Knight to h4 could be a possibility to attack the knight, but queen to g4, you see, it's very, very dangerous. So it's not so easy to attack then the pawn. Then white could maybe proceed, if you retreat here with the knight, to maybe e7. Then I think even f6 could be very, very interesting idea to split the pawn structure in front of the king. So far taking out the knight is not a possibility. So that's why bishop to f8. Here we have queen to f3, we have queen to d7 attacking further this pawn, and now comes h4. And this was a sharp idea by Anish Giri. And as I said, we have now really new Anish Giri, because let's see possible continuation. If you take bishop takes f5, then e takes f5, knight to h4, here could be a possibility, then queen to h3. And I'm not sure what to do here, because every move bishop to f5, queen to f5, then would be a forced line. After queen takes f5, then e takes f5, knight to h4, and now g4. And this was, I think, part of Anish Giri's calculation. Here black is slightly better, but this knight is basically out of game. You cannot get anywhere with this knight. If you try something like bishop to e7, then I think knight to e4, we would take away many squares now in the center of the board, and then I think the main goal would be to play something like f3, king to f2, and even rook to h1. This would be very, very risky, and I really like this idea by Anish Giri here. Really a sharp move, h4. So as I said, after bishop to f5, the correct move would be queen to f5, and it would lead now, I think, into a very, very complicated game. So that's why here Liren tried knight to e7. He didn't want to go into this line. So as I said, in this fast time format that Anish Giri prepared a trap like this was really, really incredible. Here knight to e7, we have bishop to e7, and now queen to g3, we have f6, and now b3. Again, fixing the pawn structure here simply on light squares. We're building still our fortress here against this light square bishop. The light square bishop is a little bit out of game here. So here king to h8, king to h1, rook to d8, and now f4 by Anish. We have e takes f4, bishop to f4, very nice queen and bishop battery. This is the clear target, so that's why it forces now a further trades of pieces with the move bishop to d6. And now Anish can even decide to trade off this bishop. But here again, I like now Anish's play. He's simply playing more active. He plays, of course, with his last piece that hasn't participated in the game, which is also a very natural idea in chess, because this rook on a1 is, of course, not doing anything. We want to bring the last piece into the game. So h6, we have knight to f3, and here bishop to f4. If you try here g5 to maybe break the position, try to get an attack with this kingside pawn storm, it's not so good, because bishop to d6 would be sort of force line, and you have to take now with the c pawn. If you take with the queen here, then e5 is very, very dangerous. Queen to f8, we can simply take out, and here also this pawn is hanging, so g5 would be a possibility. Maybe in this line something like c takes d6 would be the possibility, but now knight to d4 could happen, and then knight to f5, this target, this square we have targeting, I think, through the whole game. This square is so unprotected. Even if you trade off the bishop for a knight, then rook to f5 will happen, then rook from e to f1, creating a rook battery, so you would then have this backward pawn on f6. Again, not a good position. So after move knight to f3, here bishop to f4, we have reached now sort of a stage between the middle game and the end game, in which of course black has this light square bishop, white has this knight. It's a knight versus bishop middle game, but still I kind of like more white's position, because if this game goes into an endgame without minor pieces, without rooks, maybe without queens, then of course white could have a much better pawn structure and would have really a favorable endgame. So c5, here we have rook to g1, we have b5, we have g4, really again sharp move by Anish Giri, trying to break here even the position with the move g5, really incredible. Although you wouldn't have then any more pawns in front of your king, but this is really great move. It breaks the position. We have now g5 activity with the rook, and now rook to f8. Here Liren sensed that of course after potential g5, then the f5 could get open, and there are many pieces on the f5 that could be of course an object of black's attack. So queen to g3, Anish Giri gets out of this tactical mess, out of this potential tactical mess on the f-file. We have queen to d6 and now king to h2. Very cool move again by Anish, because if you take queen to d6, then I think we can even take out with the king, and in a potential endgame it's very good to have your king towards the center. And you see now with king to f4, if maybe something changes here, then the king could even come to e5, because in a potential endgame you shouldn't treat your king like something that you have to defend. It's very important to get to be active also with your king. We have c4. This was, I think, now one of the critical moments of the game. It was kind of a mistake, I think, by Liren, because it improves now basically the pawn structure of Anish Giri. We have b takes c4, b takes c4, and now d4. We have now two connected centralized pawns. We can really roll them. These are mobile pawns. We can again create new opportunities. We can even support our pawn with c3. The only way that black can make something happen here is, I think, through the attack on the b file, but still we have a great competition. We can use of course our rooks in order to defend. So rook to b8, we are battling now on the b file. We have d5 by Anish, we have bishop to d7, queen takes d6, c takes d6, and now knight to d4. Here Anish found a great square for the knight. The knight is controlling now the center of the board. We have rook to b2 attacking the pawn, but a3 not a problem, everything is protected. And we have now rook to a2, rook to e3, and now rook to e8, king to g3, and now comes a positional mistake here by Liren. He plays the move bishop to a4. Here the best move is simply to play c3, and it leads now into a simplified line. After king to f3, we could then take out this pawn, but now maybe Anish Giri can take over on the b file. Maybe something like rook to a4 could be played, but now after knight to f5, bishop to f5, g takes f5, and this would be, I think, an equal game. This could be playable for Liren and also for Anish Giri, although still this we have here the weak c3 pawn, but still also Liren has of course here the pass pawn on the a file, so I think this could lead into a draw. But bishop to a4 gives now Anish Giri extra time, and he has now the opportunity to play the move rook to g2 in order to protect his c2 pawn, but also then afterwards he can play much more free with this knight. And here c3 comes now a little bit too late, because Anish Giri here simply played a great move, knight to f5. You see now the d6 is a clear target, and here after rook to a3 we can take out this pawn. We have rook to b8, and now g5. Very cool move again by Anish. Here if you try even h takes g5, h takes g5, and even if you take f takes g5, it's not a problem about that. These are here double pawns on the g file. The most important thing is to create here two connected pass pawns here that cannot be stopped. I think you would be forced to give up maybe your bishop for one of these pawns. So it's a great move here, a great endgame breakthrough with the move g5, splitting the pawn structure, getting this f pawn out of the way, out, because we want to connect the pawns with e5. Great move. Bishop to d7, king to f4. We have now this idea, f takes g5, another problem, h takes g5, rook to f8, but now king to e5. And that's what we've talked about when we talked about this potential trades of pieces a couple more moves ago. Here the king is much more active. The king is in the center. The king cannot be attacked anymore by the rooks because the knight is such a great protective piece. Here it's a winning continuation, I think, in every line. Here for Anish Giri, h5, we have g6, again a great positional move, cutting off the king's potential activity. We have king to g8, king to d4, h4, rook to h2, h3, e5. Now it's time simply to push these pawns. There are maybe better engine move sort of for white, but it doesn't matter. I hope you realize this is a much better position. Rook to f4, rook to e4. Here we have now a trade of rooks around the square e4, bishop to f5, and now knight to d4, knight to d6, attacking the bishop. Bishop takes g6, and now e6. Although probably, as I said, there are now better engine lines. With rook to h3 we take another pawn, but still nothing dramatically even changed after this move e6, because this pawn is marching on. We have here e7, a5. Now here e8, the promotion. Liren is forced to give up his bishop for a piece. We have knight to d6, king to f6, and now knight to b5, attacking the c3 pawn. We have here d6. We have now another pass pawn, and now the king can play very actively. We have rook to e2, king to d7, rook to e7, king to c6, and now d7 in this position. Liren resigned. There's nothing that can be done. Even if you try king to h8, we'll simply play rook to e8, and it's game over. So again, great game by Anish Giri. Great performance in the Ruy Lopez. As we said, I think we have seen here some great moves by Anish. For instance, the g5 breakthrough, first the g4 in the beginning, creating madness, basically where your king could be vulnerable to your opponent's attacks. Knight versus bishop endgame, centralizing the knight, centralizing the king's activity. He applied here many beautiful elements of the chess game. Congratulations to Anish Giri. Still, maybe Liren can make it happen to the quarterfinal stage. I wish also Ding the best, and we'll see now what Anish can do in this tournament. So far, a great one for him. He is now tied up on the second place behind Magnus Carlsen. So Anish Giri, I think, is for sure in the quarterfinal stage. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. This was, I think, a great and instructive game. If you want to see more games from the tournament, check out my link, this Opera Euro chess tournament so far. Here's the link. And if you want to see maybe the best chess games of all times, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.